Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Kingsley from the Avalon Youth Services team from the Avalon Center for Women and Children, working to end domestic violence. So today, what we're going to be looking at and talking about is setting boundaries in your relationships. And boundaries are a really big foundation in everything that we do, whether that's friends, family, coworkers, peers. Boundaries let us communicate. So let's talk about boundaries. Okay, so what are boundaries? So when we think of like a geographic boundary, they're kind of lines in the sand that show where something starts and ends, like the neighbor's fence, right? That neighbor's fence or that white picket fence between your neighbor and your house or what have you, that's their yard and your yard, right? A geographic boundary. So boundaries in relationships are the same way. They're lines in the sand that we draw about what we are and aren't comfortable with. So whether that's how we want to be treated, talked to, what we're comfortable with doing, and what we're comfortable with not doing. And that kind of helps us understand our relationships and what we want from them while also maintaining respect and communication. Okay, so what kind of relationships needs boundaries? And in short, the answer is all of them. They might look a little different based on the nature of the relationship, but it could be friends, family, romantic partners, like person you're dating, peers, coworkers, the list goes on and on. So whatever person you're interacting with, boundaries are important. And you probably don't realize how much you are using boundaries in your everyday life without necessarily knowing exactly what those boundaries are. So let's learn about the types and then how to set them in our relationships and what each type might look like in everyday life. Okay, so types of boundaries. Knowing the differences in types of boundaries helps us better communicate them in our relationships, right? So we oftentimes have feelings that we just like can't put a word to, right? We're like, oh, I don't know what I really want here, and something's feeling off, and it's something to do with XYZ, and you just can't put a word to it. So understanding different types of boundaries helps us better express what we're feeling in relationships and what we would like, and helps us kind of almost go through each boundary and kind of figure that out for ourselves in our relationships before we move forward. So we identify when boundary violations occur too, because how many times like do we see something where like that feels off, but then when we are able to put a name to it, it helps us better understand and communicate. Okay, so today we're going to look at physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, material, technological boundaries. Okay, that sounds like a lot, but I promise we'll walk through them. It'll be all good. So try and brainstorm what some of these might mean. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory, and what they might look like in your relationships as we move forward. And before we click forward, I thought this was really cute. It says, the tree said, no, it's time we set some boundaries. And the tree was happy. So if anyone remembers that book, The Giving Tree, I thought that was a really good, healthy little spin on it. It's a good way to put it. Okay, so our first one's gonna be physical boundaries. I think this one might be the most, one of the most straightforward or one you've heard a lot about. So physical boundaries, it's our body, it's our choice, it's what we're comfortable with. So that could be personal space, especially during COVID, right? 6 feet with a mask, everything like that. It can be touch, like I don't, how much you do like touching if you're a hugger, if you don't really like it, however, romantic intimacy. So like the acts you want to engage in with your partner and things you aren't comfortable with. So examples could be like, I like holding hands, but I would rather not kiss in public, right? So like, I like holding hands, but kissing in public might be a little bit much for me. You communicate that, boom, physical boundary. I really love giving hugs, but I would like to be asked first. So this one employs consent, and consent is so, so important. A little diagram here. I liked the Planned Parenthood came up with a really good one. Fries, as you can see, so freely given, which means that person is in a right state of mind, sober state of mind, and they're not coerced, right? They're willing to do it, happy to do it. It's reversible, so it can be revoked at any time. You can say, yeah, I'd like to do that, and then realize, no, I don't want to. It's informed, so they fully are in the capacity to make that decision, but also they understand what they're saying and what they are consenting to. Enthusiastic, it's not just like, oh yeah, I guess. It's like, yeah, I would really like that, right? It's wholehearted. You can tell someone wants to do it. And it's specific. It's not like, oh, whatever. You don't have consent. Because you have consent for one thing doesn't mean you have consent for everything, right? So someone says, yeah, I'm totally fine with like kissing. That doesn't mean that they're okay with anything past that necessarily. And consent is step by step, right? It's walking through it, communicating, and following fries. And then some more physical boundaries can be, I'm tired, I need to rest and rejuvenate. Like, I really can't hang out right now. I need a nap. We all do that. And then, like we said, employing fries and consent. Can I touch you here? So consent is everything. Okay, and then the next is emotional boundaries. So it's the way we communicate our feelings and thoughts in our relationships, what we emotionally share, what kind of support we need, but also what kind of self-care we need in relationships, because emotions do take a toll on everybody, right? So trust is everything in this. Communication, trust with boundaries is so, so important. Emotional boundaries can look like, I would really like to talk about something that's been bothering me, but are you in a place right now to listen? Because sometimes we're really overwhelmed and our friends are really overwhelmed. And when we rant to them about something, it might be a lot for them and they're not in that space to process and help you cope. And it could be kind of overwhelming. So it's always good to check in and say like, hey, like I'm really stressed out. I need help. Like, are you in the place right now? Super important to respecting each other's emotions. I can't hang out today. I think I'm going to get some alone time. Saying, I need self-care. There is nothing wrong with that. We all need time to ourselves. We all need time to rest and rejuvenate and just like, whew, just take a breath. So there's nothing wrong with that. And those are important. And while I do love you, I need to spend time with my friends. That's a really good example of an emotional boundary with a partner or another romantic relationship. The idea of like, I'll love you and emotionally attach to you, but also it's important to spend time with others in our life and to have a holistic approach in our relationships. And this one I think is super fun is love languages. So there's a little love language quiz you can take, but it's kind of the way that we express our affection and what we like in relationships and how that works. And so I'll be linking that love language quiz in the description, and you guys can check it out and try and see what your love language is. I think it's really helpful and really nice to learn more about. Okay, and then spiritual boundaries. So when we think of the word spiritual, we think maybe of meditation, we think of the universe, of our beliefs, religion, values, etc. So spiritual boundaries are the way we can respect each other's belief systems and communicate our boundaries with religion, right? So this one's a little more nuanced, I think. Maybe you don't see it as much in your everyday life, but we all respect each other's beliefs and our values. So that's a very overarching element that we should always be seeing in our relationships. So they can look like, well, I respect your beliefs. Please do not question the validity of my religion, right? So if my friend's an atheist and I'm Christian, it's not my place and it's not respectful to question their atheism just because I believe something. So a spiritual boundary is saying like, this is what you believe and that's what I believe, and we're totally respectful and we're loving and we're kind and we communicate, right? We're not trying to impose any kind of spiritual beliefs on the other or invalidate. Okay. Or I'm not comfortable praying at the dinner table when I come over. Somebody might not be comfortable praying like your family is, and vice versa. I'm glad you have a service you like to attend, but I'm going to continue my affiliation with this church, synagogue, mosque, etc. Right? Because those beliefs and values can be different, even if it's under the same umbrella of one religion. Right? There are a lot of sects, there are a lot of different, schools of thought within those religions, and so it's really important. And then spiritual boundaries, we can also talk a little bit about in our other video called Mindfulness and Self-Care. So check it out. It'll be coming soon. And I'll have some really good stuff, as you'll see on the right-hand side here, a little graphic on it. And we'll go more in depth next time. Okay, mental boundaries. So we all think in our own way, right? Like our brains, when we try and learn something, we all have a different approach. Like I need to say a diagram, I need to write something about it, I need to like have it recorded and listen. However it is, we all think in our own way and we learn in our own way, and that's super important that we respect that. So mental boundaries refer to respecting the way we and others think. Okay, so we're all different, and that deserves respect and appreciation. So those can look like, please don't talk down to me because you think I'm not as good at this as you are. I'm capable and deserve to be treated as such, right? When we think, sometimes we can make those mistakes where we feel like, oh, I'm better at this than that person. And you kind of get that little smugness, like, yeah, I know what's going on and you don't. But that can make someone feel really hurt, and it can make them feel like they're not as valued intellectually. And that's not what we're trying to do. So it can also be like, I'm glad we disagree and can still be respectful and communicate. Like we can come to different conclusions about things, and we can have, different ways of thinking about life and things in general, but we can still be respectful and communicate, because that's what mental boundaries are. Meeting someone where they are. And then I don't think my mental health is in a place right now to take that on. So when we talk about mental boundaries, we're also talking about our mental health. And just as it says here, mental health is just as important as physical health. It's just now coming more into the mainstream, and it's definitely something that we need to look more into and we need to take seriously, because the way we think and the way we function in our minds is so important in our everyday life. And we will talk more about mental health in a few of our videos, and I will be linking some resources. If you'd like to learn more, or if you think you might be experiencing a mental illness or feeling depressed or anxious, especially with COVID. So keep an eye out for that link. Okay, and then material is kind of one that, like, we don't really use the word for material boundaries very much, but we all do it, right? So when we think material, we think stuff. And that's exactly what material boundaries are. So material boundaries really tell we communicate about what is and isn't okay to do with our belongings and relationships, right? So like, how many people, like, do you ever have a roommate or a sister or a friend or a cousin or what have you, and you have like this thing you really like, and they just touch it all the time, or like they grab it, and you're like, meh. Or someone borrows your clothes, like your sister or your brother borrows your clothes without asking, and you're like, please do not do that. That is exactly what material boundaries can look like. So it could be like, hey, I'm fine with you using my charger, like that's fine, but can you at least ask me about it so I know, because like my pet peeve is like someone takes my stuff and doesn't tell me they're borrowing it, and I'm like, I need to know, where'd it go? I'm not comfortable lending you money. All right, someone could be like, hey, just give me this for that, and you're like, I don't really, no thank you. I'd like to give my money to myself right now. And help yourself to whatever snacks are in the pantry, but please just don't eat my Thin Mints. We all have our favorite snack that we don't want anyone to touch. It can be that kind of stuff. But these boundaries can also change depending on the nature of the relationship, right? So I'm not comfortable lending you money. I'd probably be less comfortable giving $20 to some person on the street that was like, I'll give it back to you at some point, than one of my best friends who needs it for what have you, right? It's the way the nature of the relationships do change what we're comfortable with. And that's normal because our boundaries shift and they change as we get to know that person more, or things or dynamics change, etc. So don't be afraid to really set new boundaries, to reiterate boundaries, and to continue to have those conversations, because boundaries are malleable, just like our relationships are. Technological. All right, this one has really blossomed in the 21st century. So how has technology changed our relationships? That's our really good starting point. Social media, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, what have you, TikTok even, has really changed the way we view lives, share things, center ourselves around that image. Share your location or find my friends. I have my location shared with a couple of my closest friends, not all of them. Texting, talking virtually without like face to face or like through voice, right? Like texting, dating apps, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, etc. Those have all changed the way we interact with people in our relationships. So we should probably be setting boundaries for that. So tech boundaries can look like not sharing passwords with your friends or partner. That's probably a good one. And talking about that, especially if like a shared account or something. I'm happy to share my location with you, but I can't always text back right away, right? So these boundaries can be like, they're completely what you're comfortable with. So some people might not be happy to share their location. Totally fine, totally healthy. But let's say it's like, oh, it's my best friend and I want them to have my location, just in case, whatever. But they need me to constantly be texting them back, like, where are you? That's unhealthy, right? So it's like, I'm happy to share my location with you in case of emergency or what have you, but I can't always be talking and texting all the time. I have a life to live. There's a whole big world out there. I can't just be like beep, beep, beep all the time, right? I can FaceTime at 6 p.m., but I'm spending time with my family after. And that's a really important boundary in the idea of like, we don't want to give our entire lives over to technology, especially if that means like someone's asking too much from you technologically or digitally, right? It could also be boundaries of like the kind of stuff you guys talk about virtually, the kind of like photos you send, the kind of content you're sharing, especially if you're underage. We do have to talk about, sending and, exposing photos. That is not only illegal, but it can be really dangerous if that person, isn't someone that you can trust, or that there's somebody that, you don't know what might happen in that relationship. And if they break your trust, that really that they take away that control from you of those images or that content. And so not only is it illegal and it, you can get in trouble for it, but also it can be really damaging and it can be really painful to have to go through that and have someone break your trust and like leak that or what have you. Obviously it's really complex, but it's probably better to set that boundary and not share those photos or do anything like that, especially if you're underage. That is illegal. Alrighty. We can talk more about tech and relationships next video too. So we'll dive more into it. We'll get into a little FAQs. We'll explore the nuances and a little more. Okay, so now that we have learned about all the boundaries and the basics, how do we set these personal boundaries, right? So one is like defining them. What do we want to do? Like, what is it that we really want to set? And then we think about it. It's like, well, I really would like, to spend more time with my friends, let's say, in a relationship. And you're like, that sounds like it's a little bit more emotional, maybe a little bit physical. It has a lot of different elements to it, right? A little technological. Can't always be texting you if I'm hanging out with my friends. And you're like, okay, these are the kind of boundaries I want to set. And you say, all right, I want to spend more time with them. And so you communicate that. You say, hi, I love you very much, but I need to spend more time with my friends and place that balance. It has nothing to do, it's like a respect for you. And you stay simple. You don't have to over explain it because your boundaries are valid and what you're feeling is valid. And if that person is continually violating it, or you have reason to believe they're not going to like respect it or trust it, you say why it's important and you say the consequences of that. And the consequences don't have to be like, we're going to break up, or, we're not friends anymore. It could be like, I'm going to need to take a step back if we can't make this work, right? Or I really will need to like see other people, what have you, or say why it's important. Even you could say like, I've been really it's been really taking a toll on my mental health. That's a mental one. Like, I really need to take a step back. Otherwise I'm going to be feeling really off kilter and really like down. Right. And that lessens the experience of when we do hang out, and it, it puts tension in our relationship. So establishing those 4 steps, they're easy, they're clear, helps us really communicate each and every boundary in our relationships. And like we said, relationships can be different. We got friends, we got family, we got coworkers, we got peers. Obviously, the way I'm connecting with a coworker with like professional relationship is going to be different than the way I'm talking to my best friend. So we can keep that in mind. And we might do another video on that if you guys have any questions. Yeah, so just know that they can change. It's just like consent. You can revoke things, you can add things, you can talk about things. It's like a contract. You can revise it, right? If I'm like starting out with friends with somebody, I'm not going to lend them $20 right away. But if I'm my best friend, that boundary changes. Or I'm more comfortable spending more time with them, what have you. So that being said, we'll just chat about some resources. So who is Avalon? We're a confidential resource. So your information will never be shared. That's what confidential means. It's protected. If you want to talk, have any questions about healthy relationships or anything like that, you can call our hotline, which is listed on the bottom right here. You can also visit us at our website at avaloncenter.org. And then these are just 2 websites down below, loveisrespect.org and joinonelove.org. And these both have some really great healthy relationship resources and help us better understand like what a healthy relationship is and what boundaries are. And I'll also be linking those in the description. So thank you so much for joining us. We will be releasing some more videos that I think can be helpful, both in technology, our relationships, self-care, COVID, you name it. So just stay tuned. And thank you so much for joining. Bye, everyone.